The night the moon betrayed her, Ariana Vale wore silver. Not because she wanted to shine, but because she knew the light would die anyway. She stood beside Alpha Thorn, her mate, her husband, her king, as the Silver Fang Pack's annual Moon Gala began. She smiled like royalty, graceful and composed, unaware that fate had already chosen to crush her. It happened in a blink. A scent in the air, a shift in the room. Kale turned his head. Their eyes met. Not hers and Kale's, but his and hers. A stranger with fire in her hair and a startled look on her face. Ariana felt the bond snap into place before anyone said a word. The pain was instant, sharp, deep. Kale's hand loosened from hers. And just like that, 5 years of love were undone by a force older than vows, older than loyalty, the fated mate bond. They say fate is a gift, but Ariana knew better. Fate was a chain, and she was done being bound. The Silver Fang Pack thrived under the leadership of Alpha Thorn and his Luna Ariana Vale. Their bond was forged not only through strength and loyalty, but through years of shared battles and unspoken understanding. Ariana was everything a Luna should be: graceful, wise, and deeply committed to her people. Her presence brought balance to Kale's commanding nature, softening the edges of a leader often hardened by responsibility. But fate rarely respects stability. During a full moon summit between neighbouring packs, Kale's world shifted. Among the delegates stood Lyra Wynn, a fierce yet unaligned she-wolf with a defiant spirit. The moment Kale's eyes met hers, the bond snapped into place. She was his fated mate. The bond struck like lightning. Ariana felt it too, the unmistakable pull of destiny unraveling the life she had built. Her heart didn't break openly, but within, a silent storm brewed. Still, she stood tall beside Kale, refusing to let the pack see her turmoil. She loved him too deeply to let jealousy cloud her devotion to their people. Kale, caught between two truths, struggled. His sense of duty clashed with the irresistible bond pulling him toward Lyra. He had chosen Ariana once, freely and fiercely, but the moon goddess had chosen differently. Enter Alpha Darius Blackmore, the dark alpha of the Nightshade Pack. Feared across the lands, yet known for his strict honor code. He arrived at Silver Fang territory not just for diplomacy, but drawn by whispers of Kale's dilemma. Darius knew the pain of torn allegiances, of bonds that couldn't coexist. Despite his cold reputation, his advice to Kale was honest. The goddess may choose your mate, but a true alpha chooses the kind of man he becomes. Meanwhile, Ariana found quiet strength not in confrontation, but in her dearest friend, Talon. A seasoned warrior who had fought by her side through blood and bone, Talon said little, but his presence was a fortress. He never told Ariana what to do, never offered pity. He simply stood with her, reminding her of her worth when her heart wavered. Lyra, for her part, didn't seek to destroy Ariana's place. She hadn't asked for the bond either, but her presence ignited a reckoning not just within Kale, but within the entire Silver Fang Pack. Tensions rose. Some wolves whispered that Ariana should step down. Others refused to accept Lyra as Luna, even if fate demanded it. As the pack teetered on the edge of division, a threat emerged. Rogue wolves, allied with corrupt alphas, sought to exploit Silver Fang's vulnerability. War loomed. In the face of darkness, Ariana made her choice. She stood not as a scorned lover, but as Luna, stronger than fate. In the end, blood was spilled, loyalties tested, and truths revealed. The war passed, but the wounds lingered. Kale had a mate by fate, but Ariana was his Luna by soul. And sometimes the moon does not dictate the story, the heart does. The days grew longer, not by the clock, but by the weight they carried. Cale was no longer where he used to be, not by her side, not in the quiet moments of the morning, not in the warmth of shared glances across the firelight. He was near, always within reach, yet somehow farther than he'd ever been. Ariana felt it first in the way he held her hand, firm but lacking fire. His words were still gentle, still kind, but there was something missing behind them, like a forgotten promise. When she asked him what was wrong, he would smile faintly and say, "Nothing has changed, Ariana. I am loyal, I am yours." But the truth lay not in his words, it lived in his silences. He denied nothing, he never strayed. But his soul had begun to drift. The emotional and spiritual bond that had once felt unbreakable now trembled with quiet fractures. Every bondmate felt it, that sacred connection that bloomed beneath the surface like roots intertwined. Hers was wilting. The pack noticed. Wolves, for all their primal strength, were creatures of intuition. Whispers passed through the ranks like smoke. Cale is distant. She's losing him. They were once so strong. And Ariana, proud and fierce, held her head high even as her heart crumbled. She bore the weight of their pity in silence. She could not speak of the ache, not even to Lyra, her closest sister. What could she say? That the man she loved had become a ghost in his own skin. That she still caught glimpses of the old Cale in the curve of his smile, but felt like she was chasing shadows. At night, they lay together as they always had, but the space between them felt like a chasm. Ariana would reach for him, press her body against his, hoping to reignite what had dimmed. And Cale, always gentle, would respond, but not with the passion of old. It was as if he were there out of duty, not desire. Sometimes she caught him staring out into the trees, lost in thoughts he wouldn't share. When she asked him, "Where are you, Cale?" he would shake his head and whisper, "Still here, love." But Ariana wasn't sure if he even believed it himself. The bond weakened slowly, like frost creeping in at the edges of a window. She could no longer feel his emotions with the same clarity. Once, she could sense Ariana still trained with the pack, still led hunts, still wore the face of a strong, alpha-blooded mate. But inside, she was unraveling. Her strength had always come from her connection to him, and now that thread was fraying, and she had nothing to hold on to, but memories. The worst part wasn't the silence, it was the hope. Hope that he would turn to her one night with tears in his eyes and confess everything. Hope that the bond would flare back to life. Hope that love, true love, was enough. But for now, all she had was his loyalty, quiet, unwavering, and cold. And the silence between them. Lyra's presence grew like ivy, slow at first, barely noticeable, but before long she had woven herself into the daily rhythm of the pack. Her laugh echoed through the trees during training sessions, her opinions sought in strategy meetings. Even the pups had taken to her, often tugging at her sleeves and calling her big sister. Ariana watched it all from a quiet distance, the ache in her chest deepening with every passing day. Cale, for his part, remained distant. Not cold. He still treated her with kindness, but his warmth had become reserved, his gaze a flicker rather than a flame. Ariana had spent too long in silence, giving him time, hoping he would find his clarity. But time, she realized, was only deepening her wounds. That evening, with the moon half hidden behind a veil of clouds, Ariana found Cale near the edge of the forest. He was alone, staring out toward the river that divided their lands from the north. She stood there for a moment, watching his silhouette. There had been a time when the very sight of him had brought her peace. Now it summoned a storm. "You used to talk to me," she said quietly, stepping forward. Cale turned, surprised. "Ari, don't," she interrupted. "Don't say my name like that, like you still remember what it means." He opened his mouth, but words failed him. She crossed her arms, forcing herself to stay upright when all she wanted was to fall into him one last time. "I need to know," she said. "Do you love her?" Cale looked away, the silence between them turning brittle. "It's not that simple." "But it is," she said, voice steady. "Do you love her?" His jaw clenched. He didn't answer. That silence told her everything. Ariana exhaled slowly, the pain in her chest breaking open like a dam. "Then I can't stay," she whispered. "I won't beg for a love that should have been mine without question." "Ari, please." He stepped forward, but she stepped back. "I'm not leaving because I'm weak, Cale," she said. Ariana turned to go, the wind pulling strands of her hair across her face like a farewell. With each step, the forest seemed to sigh around her, mourning with her, carrying the weight of the goodbye he couldn't say, and Cale, he just stood there, like a man watching the only fire he ever needed walk away. Because sometimes, love doesn't die in explosions or betrayal. Sometimes, it withers in silence. Moonlight flickered through the dense canopy as Ariana ran, branches clawing at her arms, thorns snagging her legs. Her lungs burned with every breath, and yet she didn't stop. She couldn't. Behind her, the snarls of rogue wolves echoed like thunder through the forest. Their scent, blood, rot, madness, hung in the air, choking her. The broken bond pulsed like a phantom wound in her chest. Every step away from him, from the mate who had betrayed her, felt like her soul was tearing in half. But there was no going back. She'd rather face the wilds than crawl back to the lie she'd once called home. A howl tore through the silence, closer than before. Panic surged. She veered off the narrow deer trail and plunged into the undergrowth. Her foot caught on a root. She fell hard, face first, into damp earth. She scrambled up, dizzy, the world spinning. A rustle to her right, eyes glinting yellow in the dark. She ran. Branches whipped across her face, the underbrush growing thicker, more unforgiving. But the sounds behind her faded. The rogues were losing her. Or waiting. The forest shifted around her. Gone was the wild chaos of untamed woods. Here the trees stood silent and straight, unnaturally uniform. The air turned colder. Her instincts screamed danger, but it was too late. Figures stepped from the shadows. 3 wolves, tall and cloaked in dark leathers, surrounded her, not rogues. Disciplined, silent. Their eyes gleamed with something colder than hunger. Ariana spun, ready to fight, her fingers curling as if she could will claws to grow. But her power, always tied to her bond, was nothing now. She was just a girl, broken and alone. A deep voice cut through the silence. "She's the one!" They closed in. She thrashed, kicked, cursed, but a blow to the head sent her crashing into darkness. She woke to the scent of firewood and metal. Her head pounded. Chains clinked as she tried to sit. She was in a tent, large, made of black canvas, reinforced with bone and hide, guarded. The flap opened and the air grew colder. He entered like a shadow made flesh, tall, broad-shouldered, with midnight hair and eyes like winter storms. Alpha Darius Blackmore. He looked at her like she was prey, and something more. "So, the traitor's mate," he said, voice low and sharp. "I won't help you." He leaned down, face inches from hers. "You will. Or you'll wish the rogues had found you first." The threat hung heavy between them. But beneath it, a strange flicker of something else. Curiosity, recognition. Then he turned and left, barking orders to the guards. Ariana slumped back, heart racing. She had escaped one prison only to land in another. But this time, she would not be the victim. The bond may be broken, but her will was not. And she had no intention of staying broken. Blackmore Fortress rose like a shadow carved from stone, its jagged towers clawing at a brooding sky. Rain slicked the walls, cascading in sheets down the black stone, as if the heavens mourned Ariana's arrival. The gates groaned open, cold wind surging inward, carrying her into a world of silence and suspicion. Darius stood at the heart of it all, tall, armored in obsidian leather, with a presence as cold and commanding as the fortress itself. Scars traced his cheek and jaw, pale against his dark skin, marks of battles won and wars survived. His eyes, the color of storm-split steel, fixed on her the moment she entered. He said nothing, just watched. Ariana felt his gaze like a weight, pressing down with questions unspoken. He didn't trust her. That much was obvious. She didn't blame him. Her arrival was sudden, unannounced, and wrapped in mysteries she herself couldn't unravel. But she stood tall, her chin lifted, her eyes meeting his. She refused to flinch. "This is not a sanctuary," he said at last, voice low and rough like stone dragged over stone. "This is Blackmore. You'll earn your place, or be sent back to whatever shadows you crawled from." She offered no answer, no defiance, only a nod. That, too, he seemed to distrust. Her quarters were a cell in all but name. Narrow bed, stone walls, barred window. A single torch hissed in the damp, casting flickering gold across the grey. Outside, the wind howled like something feral. Days passed. Darius watched her from a distance, eyes always unreadable. He spoke little, but when he did, the others obeyed without question. He was Alpha here, and not by title alone. He moved with the precision of someone who'd seen too much blood to waste a step. He trusted no one, not even those who bled for him. Yet he watched her. He saw the way not warmth, not yet, but recognition. He saw the fire in her now, not the fragile glow of someone needing protection, but a burning need to survive, to fight, to matter. "You're not like the others," he said quietly. "Neither are you," she answered. He said nothing more, only turned and walked away, cloak trailing like a shadow behind him. But that night, the door to her quarters was left unlocked, and for the first time she slept without fear. The iron cuffs dug deep into Ariana's wrists, each movement a cruel reminder of her captivity. But her eyes, defiant, unwavering, never flinched. She stood tall, even shackled, before Darius, the war-hardened commander who had shattered armies and burned rebellions to ash. He watched her now, a flicker of something foreign sparking behind his cold gaze. "You think resistance will earn you mercy?" he asked, his voice as sharp as steel drawn at dawn. "No," Ariana said, her voice hoarse but steady. "I know it won't, but at least I won't give you my soul with it." Silence stretched between them, tense as a drawn bowstring. Darius studied her, the dirt smeared on her face, the bruises darkening her ribs, the stubborn tilt of her chin. She wasn't cowed, she wasn't broken. And that intrigued him more than he wanted to admit. Days passed. She was not kept in the dungeons, but neither was she free. Her cell had light, and eventually he allowed her access to the training yard, under watch, of course, but the chains were gone. "You want to fight so badly," he said, tossing her a wooden practice sword one morning. "Prove it." She took it like a warrior accepts a challenge, with silent fury. At first the guards jeered, a girl with a sword against seasoned soldiers, but the jeers turned to silence, then awe. Ariana fought like a creature of fire and storm, reckless at times but impossibly resilient. Each time she was knocked down, she rose again, bleeding but unyielding. Darius began watching her sessions from the shadows. He never praised her, but he noticed the way her footwork improved, how her strikes became less angry, more precise. She fought not just to escape, but to reclaim herself, not to win his approval, but to remind herself she still existed. One evening, after an especially grueling session, Ariana collapsed against the stone wall, breath ragged. Darius approached, a flask of water in hand. She didn't look up, but didn't refuse it either. "Why train me?" she asked after a long silence. "To tame me? Break me from a different angle?" "No," he said, sitting beside her on the rough stone. "You're already broken." She turned her head sharply, jaw clenched. "But not weak," he added. Their eyes met, not as captor and prisoner, not as enemies, but as two people who had bled too much, lost too much, and yet refused to fall. "You remind me of someone." The bond that formed between them was not romantic, nor magical. It was forged in the silent hours between training and exhaustion, in the bruises they both carried from old battles. Pain was their common language. Respect began to replace hostility, a fragile trust growing in the barren ground between them. Ariana still hated him for what he represented. Darius still saw her as dangerous. But now there was something more. An understanding that neither was quite what the world had painted them to be. And sometimes that was enough. In the war-torn silence of a fortress ruled by power, a girl who refused to kneel and a man who had never needed to began to find something unexpected. Not peace, but possibility. The cave was silent, save for the distant howl of wind brushing over stone. Ember sat cross-legged near the fire, her eyes reflecting the flickering light, her mind chasing shadows of the past. Darius stood at the entrance, watching the night with the stillness of a sentinel. The darkness outside was nothing compared to the storm inside them. "She left me," Darius said suddenly, his voice low, rasping like gravel. He didn't look at Ember when he spoke, as if the night needed to hear it first. "My mate chose power, a seat beside an alpha in the east. Said I was too much wolf, not enough man." Ember didn't respond right away. She knew this terrain, the sting of abandonment, the ache of a wound no claw could make. She'd worn that pain like armor too. "I trusted someone once," she said, stirring the fire with a stick. Sparks flared. "He said he loved me, swore the moon rose for us. But when my pack fell, he disappeared, took the gold and fled. Said he never wanted to be with a broken alpha." Darius glanced at her now, eyes sharp and golden. "You were an Alpha?" She nodded. "I was, until betrayal took more than my title, took my faith, in others, in myself." Silence settled between them, thick and heavy, but not empty. It was a silence of understanding, of shared scars. Two wolves who had bled alone for too long. "I never thought I'd speak of her again," he admitted, stepping into the light. "You make it feel less like weakness." Ember gave a dry smile. "Maybe we've both been running so long we forgot how to walk beside someone." He crouched near the fire, the flames casting shadows across his face. "When did you stop believing in love?" "The day I watched it walk away without looking back." Darius nodded slowly, as if her words struck a chord he'd once played himself. "And yet here we are, still breathing." He noticed her restraint, how she never used her strength to dominate, only to protect. There was no wild heat between them, no sudden pull of fate or feral craving. What stirred was subtler, like a fire lit with careful hands. A choice. A willingness. "I don't need a mate to complete me," Ember said, eyes steady on the flames. "Nor I," Darius replied, voice just as sure. "But I would stand with someone who knows the cost of trust, who chooses me not out of destiny, but out of strength." Their gazes met and the fire cracked softly between them. For the first time in a long while, the night felt less empty. There were still battles ahead, still ghosts to confront, but in this moment, in this cave lit by wounded hearts and cautious hope, something new was born. Not a promise, not yet, but the beginning of one. Cale sat by the window of his study, quill trembling in his hand. Outside, the sky darkened with the coming storm, but it was nothing compared to the turbulence inside him. He had rewritten the letter 3 times already, each version too proud, too bitter, too hollow. This one would be different. This one would be honest. "Ariana, I was a fool. If I could gather every moment we lost to silence and pride, I would give them back to you tenfold. Come back. Please. We were never perfect, but we were real. I still hear your laugh in the hallways. I still sleep on the left side, waiting for you to claim the right." He paused. Ink bled into the parchment where his hand rested. "Lyra is with child. Mine. I won't lie to you, she didn't plan it, nor did I, but life, it seems, is not a thing we can control. I don't know what this means for the future, I only know that it doesn't erase the past." Cale's hand trembled. "I never stopped loving you. Not for a single breath." He signed his name, folded the letter carefully, and sealed it with the crest she once wore on a chain around her neck. He sent it by Raven the same evening, watching the bird disappear into the clouds, like a prayer he dared not speak aloud. Days passed, then a week. No reply. Ariana stood by the cliffs, wind pulling at her hair, the salt air stinging her eyes. The letter trembled in her hands, unopened. She had known it was from him the moment the Raven landed. Cale's handwriting, that seal, that aching familiarity. She didn't want to read it. She read it anyway. The words cut deeper than she thought they would. The part about Lyra was like cold water down her spine. She knelt on the grass, set the letter down, and struck a match. The fire caught quickly, the parchment curling, blackening at the edges. Her hands shook, but she didn't pull away. She watched until the last ash lifted into the wind, vanishing over the cliffs and into the sea. When she rose, there were tears on her cheeks, but her spine was straighter. Ariana turned from the edge and walked away, barefoot over stone, into a future she had not yet dared to imagine. The first rays of dawn broke across the high walls of the obsidian fortress. Their light filtered through the mist that rolled off the surrounding moors. Inside those cold stone walls, something ancient stirred, an awakening not of the flesh, but of spirit. In the silence before morning drills, Darius summoned Ariana to the war chamber. Gone was the suspicion once laced in his gaze. In its place stood respect, hard-earned and unspoken. "You've walked through fire," he said, his voice a low thunder. "Now, take command of the women who have known only chains. Break them or raise them, make them yours." And so he gave her what had never been given before: authority. At first, there was resistance. The fortress's female warriors, once slaves, prisoners, or forgotten conscripts, were hardened by pain, skeptical of hope. They had seen many come and fail. Ariana stood before them, no crown on her brow, no magic to dazzle. Only eyes that had seen too much, a voice that never trembled, and scars that whispered of survival. "I'm not here to save you," she told them on the first day. "I'm here to remind you what you are: steel in bone, flame in breath." What followed was not training, it was transformation. Ariana broke down every notion of weakness they clung to, redefined strength, not as brute force, but as discipline, clarity, will. She taught them to fight in silence and in shadow, to move like whispers through corridors, to read wind patterns and wield twin blades with fluidity. They became invisible ghosts in the night, each one a tempest cloaked in calm. She listened, too, something no commander had ever done. She learned their names, their fears, the reasons they had stayed alive this long. With every word, she stitched a thread between them, not a chain, but a bond. Where once there had been fractured spirits, Ariana built a sisterhood. Soon, word of her methods spread beyond the fortress walls. Male commanders whispered of her with unease. Soldiers began calling the women of her ranks shadows in armor. Impossible. She led her warriors through hidden passages and onto the outer ramparts. They rained silent death from above, moved through fire like smoke. Where others fought with rage, they fought with precision. The enemy never saw them coming, only glimpses of dark eyes and blade flashes before the end. By dawn, the fortress still stood, untouched but for the bodies of the fallen. Among them not one of Ariana's warriors. When Darius returned, he found the women gathered in the courtyard, standing behind their commander, heads high. He looked at Ariana, blood-streaked, unbowed, and something flickered in his gaze. A recognition of something beyond loyalty. From that day forward, no one questioned her command. No man dared speak her name without a measure of fear. The fortress had not just gained a new leader, it had birthed a myth. And, in the whispers of the wind, the Shadow Queen rose. The gates of Blackmoor loomed ahead, jagged spires against the grey sky, like the teeth of some ancient slumbering beast. Cale rode in silence. The rhythm of his horse's hooves drowned beneath the weight of his thoughts. He had come under the banner of peace, an envoy draped in diplomacy and dust. But in truth, he had come for her. It had been years since he last saw Ariana. The keep was colder than he remembered, less a fortress and more a monument now, carved from stone and sorrow. Cale dismounted slowly, greeted by guards who offered no warmth. The throne room echoed with silence as he entered, but she was already there, standing tall beneath the fractured light of stained glass. Ariana. No longer the girl who once danced with fire at his side, no longer the dreamer who clung to him when the world seemed too wide. She stood, like a blade drawn from its sheath, refined, dangerous, untouchable. "Cale," she said, voice calm, almost curious. "You look older." He gave a tight smile, trying not to falter under the weight of her gaze. Time has its way with us all. She inclined her head, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "So, peace then?" He nodded. Peace. But neither of them spoke of treaties. The words between them had little to do with borders or armies. There was too much history for diplomacy. Too many ghosts lingered in the room, uninvited but ever present. "Why now?" she asked, her tone even, her eyes distant. "After everything." Cale hesitated. He didn't know how to explain the pull that had led him here, the ache of absence.
"Oh, I'm not the girl who waited in rain for letters that never came," she said. "Nor the one who begged you to choose me over glory."
Cale swallowed. Regret crawled in his chest, like ivy through broken stone. "I made mistakes. Oh, we both did." Her voice softened, but she didn't look at him. "But we survived them." There was no anger in her. That hurt more than rage might have. Rage meant fire, meant embers still smouldered, but Ariana was calm, distant, whole without him. The bond that had once tethered them had frayed in silence, worn thin by years and choices neither could unmake. It had not snapped in fury, it had dissolved like frost beneath the sun. "I should go," Cale murmured, the words bitter on his tongue. She nodded without turning. "Safe travels, Cale." He lingered a moment longer, hoping for something, a word, a glance, anything that might bind them back together. But there was only silence. Outside, snow had begun to fall. Cale mounted his horse and did not look back. The gates of Blackmoor closed behind him, with a finality that echoed through his bones. He rode away, the wind slicing through his cloak, colder than it had ever felt. And somewhere deep inside he knew whatever they had once been was gone. Not stolen, not shattered, simply gone. The moon hung high in the ink-black sky, casting silver light over the quiet forest clearing. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, rustling them like whispers of fate. Darius stood still, tall and silent, watching as Ariana stepped into the light. Her presence, even now, felt like a song, low and haunting, but filled with warmth. He had waited, through battle and betrayal, through heartbreak and healing. He had waited. Never once had he claimed her, even though the bond between them pulsed like a living thing. He knew her heart had been broken before. He knew what it meant to offer freedom instead of demand loyalty. Ariana met his gaze, eyes soft but sure. "You never forced me," she said quietly, her voice carried by the wind. "You never tried to make me forget what I'd lost." "No," Darius replied, "because love, when it's real, doesn't need to be forced." For a long moment, there was only the sound of the forest. Then she stepped closer. "I was angry for a long time," she admitted. "At him, at myself, even at you. I thought choosing you would mean giving up, settling for second best. But you waited." "I choose you, Darius," she whispered. "Not because I'm wounded, not because I'm lost, but because I found something in you that I trust, that I love." A soft, stunned breath left him. For a heartbeat, Darius said nothing. Then he took her hand, turning it in his own and pressing it to his chest. "You don't know what this means to me." "I do," she said, "because it means the same to me." He leaned down, resting his forehead against hers. "From this moment on," he murmured, "we move forward together." Their bond, once a quiet hum, flared gently, not overwhelming, but warm and sure. It wrapped around them like a vow, not of possession, but of partnership. For the first time, it was whole. Not born from desperation or prophecy, but from a choice made freely. They stood in silence, two hearts finally aligned. No war waited at the edge of the clearing. No ghosts from the past dared interrupt. Just the two of them. Darius, who had waited without demand, and Ariana, who had chosen without fear. And in that moment, the world felt right. Not perfect, but right. The wind whipped across the cliffs of Blackmoor, cold and wild, like the untamed spirit that now stood at its edge. Ariana's boots crunched against the frost-laced earth, but she barely felt the cold. The new moon hung above her like a promise, dark, mysterious, and full of silent power. No light, no guidance, just darkness and the strength one finds within it. Behind her, the members of her new pack stood quietly, watching. They had followed her here not because of prophecy or legacy, but because she had earned their loyalty. Piece by piece, battle by battle, word by word. This was not the destiny others had carved for her. This was the life she had chosen for herself. She took a deep breath. The scent of the sea mingled with pine and ash, a blend of old pain and new beginnings. Her fingers curled at her sides, not trembling but steady. For the first time in her life, Ariana didn't carry the weight of being someone's daughter, someone's mate, someone's Luna. She carried the weight of being herself. The title of Alpha didn't rest on her shoulders like a crown. It pulsed through her like blood. She had not inherited it, she had become it. Through fire, through loss, through the shattering of every chain others had wrapped around her heart. "I'm not what they made me," she whispered into the wind. Then louder for them all to hear, "I am what I chose to become." Her voice echoed over the cliffs, carried by the night wind. There was no ceremony, no sacred. It started low, building with each breath, a call that was not of mourning, nor of mating, but of declaration. A howl, not as a Luna at her mate's side, nor a daughter upholding a bloodline. This was the cry of an Alpha in her own right, chosen by no one, forged by everything. Her pack joined her. One by one, voices lifted in harmony, a pack of misfits, survivors and warriors. They howled for her, with her, because of her. The night trembled. And in that moment, Ariana felt it. Not fate, but something fiercer. Freedom. The kind you win. The kind you bleed for. The kind that comes not from what the stars write for you, but from what you write for yourself. As the howling faded, Ariana turned to face them. Her people. Not broken, not lost. Reborn. Like her. "We don't follow blood," she said. "We don't follow titles. We follow strength. We follow truth. We follow each other." A chorus of growls and nods answered her. She stepped down from the cliff's edge into the circle of her pack. They didn't kneel. She didn't ask them to. She walked among equals, even as she led. The night was dark, but Ariana didn't need the light to see. She had become her own, and under the new moon's shadow, a new Alpha rose. Ariana Vale was the Luna of the Silver Fang pack, a queen in every way but name. For 5 years she stood beside Alpha Kale Thorn, her mate, her love, her destiny, until fate had other plans. On the night of the Moon Gala, Kale meets his true fated mate, and everything Ariana built begins to crumble. Heartbroken and betrayed, Ariana walks away from the only life she's ever known. But the wild doesn't offer peace, only danger. Captured by the feared Nightshade pack, she comes face to face with Alpha Darius Blackmore, a scarred, ruthless leader with a heart colder than stone, and a past just as broken as hers. In a world where destiny binds mates and power decides worth, Ariana must choose. Will she remain a prisoner of fate, or rise from the ashes and write her own legend? Chains of the Moon is a dark, emotionally intense tale of betrayal, healing, and love that defies the laws of the supernatural. Perfect for fans of fated mates, alpha dynamics, and strong heroines who don't just survive, they take the throne.